One evening, Leif Erikson tells all the children a story about how he found a new continent and named it Vinland. It was covered in greenery, and local people lived there, speaking their unique language. However, they still managed to befriend them, and Leif received a pipe as a gift from them. Later, Thors comes home and says it's time for all the children to go home. Then Ylva, Thor's daughter, arrives with 2 frozen sheep, while Thorfinn is already dreaming of his fight with the Jarmungandr serpent. However, he wakes up because his sister arrived. The next morning, they all work together to clear snow from the roof. He accidentally slips from the roof and finds a frozen, barely alive slave with a chain around his neck. They carry him into the house and try to revive him. Ylva worries that this slave might bring misfortune upon them. Thorfinn comes home, and at that moment, Thors manages to revive the slave. The slave then says he escaped from Halfdan. He starts hallucinating and calls Thors and his family his parents. Then Thors tells everyone about the land of Dayblank, where there are many pastures, warm weather, and rich soil. Thors offers the slave to go there with his family. Afterward, one of the residents enters the house and says that Halfdan is in the harbor. Halfdan says that his slave, Love, escaped during the night, but he was interrupted by 2 of the warriors whose relationship with him was difficult in the past. Halfdan stops the skirmish with chains and punishes his warrior. Then the chieftain enters Thor's house. Thors asks how much his slave costs. Halfdan replies that the price is to sheep. Then he says he doesn't want to sell the slave because he will torture him in front of other slaves to teach them a lesson. Thors offers for sheep, but Halfdan says that if he needs him so badly, he is willing to sell the slave for 8 sheep. Thors agrees, and Halfdan goes to choose his sheep. However, after this deal, the slave immediately dies. The next day, the children are playing with wooden swords, and Leif notices a warship and asks Thorfinn to urgently deliver the information to his father, Thors. Now a huge ship is arriving. It's the Vikings led by Captain Floki, and they need Thors. It turns out that Floki is someone with whom the Roman troll previously served. Then Thors asks why they have come. Floki talks about an attack on a Viking base and that a big war is approaching. However, Thors says it doesn't concern him. Floki says that it's an invitation from the leader of the Vikings, Sigvald, and he doesn't accept rejections. Floki also says that if Thors refuses, then Floki will not have fulfilled his order, which means they won't leave here empty-handed. Leif, meanwhile, tells everyone that the Vikings are some of the strongest warriors, whom even the king could not force to pay taxes. Afterward, the Vikings sound the horn for assembly on the ship before departure. Floki says that he came here for the hero Thors. He invites everyone else to join him and Thors in Jomsborg. Then the Vikings sail away, and the village youth rejoice that they have been invited to war. However, Thors himself is saddened by this, as he could not refuse the invitation and put all the residents at risk. Then they begin to prepare the ships, and the children at this time are training to fight with swords. Later, one of the residents brings a child with a fracture to Thors. Thors bandages the child's arm and learns that his son Thorfinn did it. Thors says he is very sorry that children suffered at the hands of his son, while Thorfinn is at home looking for weapons so that he can also be taken to war. He finds weapons and armor and takes out a knife, but Thors grabs the knife by the blade and asks why Thorfinn needs a knife. Thorfinn says it's for his enemy, Halfdan. However, Thors tells his son that he has no enemies. After this answer, Thorfinn runs away. Next, we are shown how Floki ordered the assassination of Thors by the pirate mercenary Askeladd. The chieftain also asks what kind of warrior Thors is. Floki replies that Thors is no longer a warrior. Meanwhile, in the village, the recruits are preparing to depart. Thors plans to stop in Norway, leave the newcomers there, and then ask for help from Norwegian sailors. Thors doesn't plans to lead the newcomers to their doom, and he also waits for his son to come and see him off, but Thorfinn doesn't appear. In the end, 2 ships set sail. Later, it turns out that Thorfinn secretly snuck onto the ship and hid in a barrel. However, there's nowhere to go, so they take the boy with them. In the morning, they reach the Faroe Islands. They want to stop at the nearest village to replenish supplies. However, Leif notices that something is wrong. It turns out they've fallen into an ambush. Debris and stones are thrown at them, blocking the exit. Then, ships appear, led by Askeladd, who draws his sword and gives Thorfinn a dagger for protection. Then he jumps onto Askeladd's to ships, led by Bjorn, and starts tearing apart the bandits with his bare hands. He walks across the ship, dismantling everyone, including Bjorn, who has eaten a berserker mushroom and gone mad. He starts throwing his own men around and even breaking the ship. Thors realizes that Bjorn is out of control. Bjorn attacks, but in response, Thors delivers a couple of blows that take him down. However, Bjorn gets back on his feet and continues to fight. Meanwhile, Askeladd, on his ship, has sailed up to Thors' and Leif's ships and is preparing to attack them. Suddenly, Bjorn's body flies directly onto the gangplank between the ships, and then Thors returns to his ship. He suggests that Askeladd take the wounded and leave while they are still intact. Leif asks that none of the newcomers interfere. Thors understands that if a massacre begins, he can defeat everyone, but his newcomers might get hurt. Therefore, he challenges Askeladd to a one-on-one duel. Askeladd accepts the challenge. If Thors wins, the pirates will leave, and if he loses, the pirates can do whatever they want. Thors also realizes that the pirates were sent by Floki. Then Thors walks towards Askeladd, but Askeladd cuts the mast rope with an unexpected blow, causing Thors to fall. In response, he attacks, but Askeladd, due to his agility, dodges, and due to the force of Thors' blow, his sword breaks. However, he knocks Askeladd's sword away and places his own sword at his throat. Askeladd asks him to kill him, but Thors says there's no need. Askeladd doesn't understand why Thors has been hiding in Iceland with such strength for so long. Then Askeladd offers Thors to become their leader. However, it turns out it was just a technical joke, a jutsu. At this time, Bjorn jumps at Thorfinn and takes him hostage. Thors again places his sword at Askeladd's throat and then throws the sword into the water. Askeladd declares Thors the winner and raises his hand. However, the archers mistake this for a signal and shoot Thors. Then Thors asks Askeladd to keep his word as a warrior, and he also asks Leif to take Thors' head to the Viking leader Sigvald so that he sees the dead Thors and leaves the village in peace. He releases Thorfinn, who, crying, runs to his father. At this time, Ari, one of the recruits, attacks Askeladd, who knocks him out with a blow and tells the pup to appreciate what Thors, who is worth 100 such pups, did for him. Therefore, Askeladd takes Thors' ship, where Thorfinn remains, holding a grudge and promising to kill Askeladd. Later, Askeladd's ships dock on the River Humber in England. Thorfinn follows the pirates, but slips and falls from a mountain. Coming to his senses, he runs to a tavern and gets drunk. Then he sees lights and hears people screaming in the distance. The pirates have burned the village, taking some of the inhabitants captive. Thorfinn sneaks up to the pirates at night. In one of the houses, he finds Askeladd. He enters the house and raises his sword at him, but due to his honor, he doesn't do it. Therefore, in the morning, Thorfinn, with a sword in his hands, challenges Askeladd to a duel. Askeladd says that the boy should have cut off his head last night, to which Thorfinn replies that he is Thors' son and he doesn't act like a coward. And Askeladd receives a reward from Floki's men. Meanwhile, Leif and the newcomers reach home and report Thors' death. Leif also promises that he will find Thorfinn no matter what and bring him home. In the meantime, Thorfinn comes to his senses after the battle and ran into the forest, where he began to train to become stronger. Bjorn accidentally notices him. Thorfinn calls him a coward and immediately attacks, but the pirate blocks the blow and calls the boy a weakling. At night, Thorfinn is attacked by a wolf, which he kills with his dagger in self-defense. After that, he continues his training. Later, Thorfinn comes to the pirates again and again challenges their leader to a duel. Askeladd accepts the boys' challenge. Thorfinn attacks, but the pirate dodges and kicks him with a counterattack. Thorfinn throws daggers, but Askeladd blocks the blow again and says that he doesn't have time to kill children, so it's better for Thorfinn to gain some experience first, and then there will be a proper fight. Thorfinn promises to become stronger and kill Askeladd. Then the pirates set sail and Thorfinn goes with them. After that, the pirates decide to earn some money and turn to the Danish warriors to help them in the war for their money. Unexpectedly, the English attack and a massacre begins. Thorfinn is caught by one of the English men, but Askeladd kills the warrior. After that, Thorfinn is attacked again, but he deals with the enemy with his dagger. As a result, Thorfinn becomes a pirate and, led by Askeladd, fights on their side. He simultaneously gains experience and develops his combat skills. Meanwhile, the war has escalated even further. King Sweyn of Denmark said that in the summer he himself would lead the troops into battle, and in winter he ordered them to wait. Askeladd is thinking about what they should do during the lull. As a result, they decide to join one of the attacks on a clan fort and seize their treasures. Askeladd asks Thorfinn to go to the leader of the attack, General Jabat, and tell him that the pirates want to help him win, but in return they will take half of all the loot. Thorfinn says that Askeladd will keep running from him, and he is already ready to kill him. Askeladd replies that when the boy brings him the head of the fort's leader, then they will talk with swords. Thorfinn goes to the camp. He delivers the message, but the general says that the pirates have become too arrogant. However, if Thorfinn does not give a signal to his own, it will mean that the attack has 100 more enemies. In the end, the leader agrees but warns that if the messenger lied, they would use the eyes on the ass technique. After that, Thorfinn sends a signal to the pirates, and preparations for the attack begin. Thorfinn found out who was in charge of the fort and went for his head. Then the pirates appear and carry a ship in their arms to the river bank to enter the fort through the harbor. There they come under fire from archers, but Thorfinn jumps onto the fort wall, climbs up to the archers, and begins to cut them down alone. He cuts off the captain's head, but his head flies into the moat, and he jumps after it. The pirates, meanwhile, have landed and begun the attack. The Franks also broke through the gates, but the pirates had already killed everyone. General Jabat at this time is thinking about how to cut off the pirates and not share the loot. However, a warrior appears and reports that the pirates have taken all the treasures and fled. After that, Askeladd appears and says that the treasures are part of the pirates and the victory is part of the general. Then appears in the peat, doesn't throw the captain's head onto the ship, and challenges Askeladd to a fight. Askeladd accepts the challenge, but first they need to get out of here. In the end, Askeladd and his ship reached the village led by Gorm. Askeladd thanks his fighters for a great year and says that they all rested until spring. Then Askeladd asks Uncle Gorm to be his witness, as he has a duel coming up. After that, Gorm announces the start of the duel between Thorfinn and Askeladd. Thorfinn immediately attacks, but Askeladd throws him back. Then Thorfinn knocks the sword out of Askeladd's hand with a blow and retreats from a counterattack. Askeladd tries to anger Thorfinn by deliberately mispronouncing his father's name. Thorfinn says that if Askeladd had fought like a man back then, his father would still be alive. After that, he angrily rushes at Askeladd, who grabs him by the arms, throws him to the ground, and knocks him out. Next, we are shown August 1013, where Vikings and Danes, led by King Sweyn, invaded the northern part of England and captured 5 major cities. However, in October of the same year, their offensive stalled at the trading city of London. Askeladd is surprised that London has held out for so long. He also did not expect Thorkel to switch to the side of the English. Urin says that Thorkel will do anything for money. Askeladd asks Thorfinn to bring him Thorkel's head, but Thorfinn says that the only thing he wants is to kill Askeladd. The leader says that Thorfinn should talk less and do more, as he is still too weak. After that, we are shown Floki sailing to Thorkel to deliver King Sweyn's message, which states that the King of England has fled to the lands of the Franks, and resistance is useless. If they surrender now, he will spare everyone and preserve their property. He also invites Thorkel to return to King Sweyn's ranks. However, Thorkel refuses, as he enjoys fighting against a strong opponent. Then he grabs a giant boulder and throws it next to the ship, and then orders the archers to kill everyone there. Floki reports the refusal to the king. Sweyn says that his troops should immediately attack. The ships begin the attack. They sail under the bridge and cut down the supports. Thorkel throws a tree onto one of them and smashes it to splinters. Then Askeladd shows the boy the giant Thorkel. Thorfinn reaches him, and they begin to fight. Thorfinn makes a cut on the giant's arm, but he attacks him in response. Then Thorfinn aims for the neck, but the giant defends himself with his hand and begins to throw Thorfinn to the ground. The signal to retreat sounds. The Danish troops retreat. This distracts Thorkel, and Thorfinn cuts off his fingers and frees himself. After that, the giant asks the boy's name. Thorfinn says that he is Thor's son and jumps into the river. Thorkel's people said that he had fun fighting with this boy. He suggests repeating it. Thorfinn, meanwhile, got out on shore with broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder. He meets Askeladd, who says that 80% of the army is going to Essex and that the king decided to leave Prince Canute in charge of the siege with 4,000 warriors. Thorkel, learning that Prince Canute is there, decided to attack the attackers himself at dawn. Askeladd's men, who had separated from the main army, notice a messenger who arrived with a message that Thorkel and about 500 of his loyal warriors are coming for the king's father. It turned out that Prince Canute and his 4,000-strong army were completely defeated. As a result, Prince Canute is taken prisoner. The messenger suggests that Askeladd also join the main army, but the pirate unexpectedly cuts off the messenger's head and says that Ragnarok will begin soon. Askeladd asks to bury the messenger's body and his horse, and then says that they will go against Thorkel's army and save the prince and get a huge pile of silver for him. Meanwhile, Thorkel's detachment is marching in big strides on the heels of the main army. Thorkel doesn't particularly like taking prisoners, but since King Sweyn has given him gifts, he wants to attract his attention with the help of Prince Canute. Suddenly, Thorkel notices the surviving warriors of Prince Canute, who say that there are 2,000 of them, though in reality they are asking for about 400 to release Prince Thorkel without problems. He releases the hostages, and then they ask him to show them an excellent battle, and the fight begins. After that, they notice a fire in the distance, which turned out to be a trap prepared by Askeladd. The flames quickly reach the battle site. Then Askeladd sends Thorfinn after the prince. In the smoke, Thorkel's men found Prince Canute and Ragnar, and at that very moment, Thorfinn appeared and stood between them and the prince. Thorfinn says that he came here to save the prince. Then Thorkel appears, happy to meet Thorfinn again. Thorkel has two questions for the boy. 1. Was this arson their doing? 2. Is he really the son of Thors and Helga? Thorfinn was surprised how the giant knew his parents' names. Thorkel says he guessed that he was the son of the Roman troll Thors, and that's why he's so strong, as Thors was the only one in the world whom Thorkel considered stronger than himself. After that, the giant tells Thorfinn not to take the prince, as they are all going in the same direction anyway. Thorfinn, along with Ragnar and the prince, reach Askeladd. Ragnar asks Askeladd and his men to deliver Prince Canute to the main army. However, Askeladd asks to see Canute's face first to know whom he will be protecting. Further along the road, Askeladd asks the ferryman to deliver a letter to the elders, in which he requested reinforcements from Wales. Then Hawk determined that Thorkel was only 1 day's walk away from them, and Askeladd realized that Thorkel was catching up to them very quickly. At night, they stopped for a rest. Askeladd, after seeing the prince's face, realized that it was not the face of a king, and therefore he decided to influence Canute's character in the future. Then they meet Askeladd's reinforcements in the form of General Gratian and his ships for crossing. Thorkel learned from the locals in the morning that they had seen 2 ships from the direction of Wales during the night. Thorkel realized that reinforcements had arrived for the prince, so there was no point in pursuing him anymore. Meanwhile, Askeladd and his men had already crossed to the other side of the river, and he introduced Thorfinn as Canute's guard. According to the plan, Askeladd's men are going to walk to Gainsborough, and General Gratian will show them the way. The general also said that he would only help the prince on the condition of a future peace agreement between the Danes and Wales. After that, they all set off through the mountains. Then messengers from the kingdom of Jeongju appear on their path. It turned out to be an ambush. Jeongju's men completely surrounded Askeladd's warriors. Gratian asks them to calm down and put away their swords, as there is no need to fight against the Danes in the forest. However, the leader of Jeongju has other plans for this situation. Jeongju's goal is to capture the prince and use him to conduct further negotiations with King Sweyn. Askeladd decides to play a little. He brings out the prince and asks him to speak, but the prince hides behind Ragnar's back and says nothing. After that, Askeladd asks Gratian to go with him and tell Jeongju about their plan. Jeongju also comes out to talk. He wants the agreement to be equitable if they allow this army to pass through their lands. Then Askeladd tells him his secret, from which we learn that Askeladd is a descendant of the commander Artorius, who was an ancient British leader and became the prototype of the legendary King Arthur. Askeladd wants to make the simpleton Canute the next king of Denmark and himself take the highest position in the government. From there, he will be able to impose a non-aggression pact on the new king with Wales. In general, Askeladd does not intend to let the Danes set foot on Welsh soil. King Sweyn, meanwhile, with his main army, is conquering English territories with great strides. The king asks Floki about Prince Canute. Floki reports that his army was defeated and there is no more news about Askeladd. Askeladd and Jeongju, meanwhile, agreed that Askeladd's warriors would surrender their weapons and pass in that state to the border of Jeongju's lands. And then their weapons would be returned to them, and they would go on. Also, on the way, the secret of why the prince has been silent all this time is revealed. He says that he is silent not out of fear, but because all his words have state significance, and without the king's permission. He cannot make promises or conclude agreement. However, Canute still signs the agreement with Valsa, and they set off. It starts to snow, then a blizzard begins. Askeladd decides to seize the nearest village and kill all witnesses there, but they don't notice a teenage girl who was in her hiding place at that moment. Meanwhile, Thorkel learns from messengers that a Danish detachment has captured a village, and the local lord is requesting their help. They received this information from a surviving girl. Thorkel realized it was Canute and Thorfinn and immediately ordered his warriors to prepare for the journey. At this time, the sentries heard the approaching army. Askeladd realized they had been discovered and ordered everyone to get ready to leave, but it turned out to be an English detachment. Askeladd ordered his men to find and bring the leader of this detachment for questioning. He also told Bjorn that now was the time to deal with Ragnar. Several warriors were sent to the prince's house to deliver a message to Ragnar, who couldn't understand how they had been found since they had killed all witnesses. The warriors also said that Askeladd had ordered everyone to go to the city of Derby. After this, Ragnar decides to go to the leader himself and confront him about this recklessness. On the way, Ragnar is speared from a snowdrift, but he tells them to call Askeladd, as he has a secret about the prince that he must tell him personally. Ragnar revealed that there is currently a power struggle, and the court will be divided into those for Canute and those for Harold. And therefore, to avoid dividing Denmark, the king decided to kill one of his sons. The prince's true enemy is his father, King Sweyn. Afterward, Ragnar's body was brought to the prince, and they said that a group of English men had attacked him and killed him with a spear in the back. Askeladd asked the prince to urgently prepare for the journey. From the subsequent conversation between Askeladd and Bjorn, it became clear that they had killed Ragnar because he had made the prince weak by flawlessly protecting him. And Askeladd wanted to make the prince a true king. Thaliauho reported that he had discovered a large detachment, and it was most likely Thorkel. It turned out that Thorkel's detachment was already a few kilometers from the village. The giant ordered the village to be surrounded and everyone there killed except the prince and the boy with knives, as he wanted to deal with Thorfinn personally. Bjorn grabs the princess, slaps her in the face, and brings her to her senses. After this, Askeladd brings several traitors who wanted to defect to Thorkel's side. Askeladd says that everyone should choose for themselves whom to follow. In the end, Thorkel slaughters all those who betrayed Askeladd and remained in the village, as he doesn't need cowards who surrender without a fight. On the way, Askeladd encounters a bridge, which he orders to be destroyed to delay Thorkel. At this time, he calls Bjorn and Thorfinn and asks them to transfer the prince to another sleigh, Bjorn to take the reins, and Thorfinn to guard the prince. Askeladd, with the help of his strike, realized that there were traitors in his army. It turned out that more than half of the men had already decided to kidnap the prince and hand him over to Thorkel when they joined him. Afterward, Thorkel's detachment appears on the mountain. His men on the escalator decided to rebel and surrounded the carriage with the prince. The fighters ask them to leave the prince, and then everyone will remain alive. Askeladd says that he hated all of them for all 10 years spent with these warriors. Afterward, he takes out several warriors, and the slaughter begins. At the same moment, the carriage with Bjorn and the prince breaks loose from the sleigh. The horses set off in pursuit. Askeladd remains to fight. After a few hundred meters, the warriors kill the horses, and the carriage overturns. Afterward, Bjorn eats a berserker mushroom and begins to fight the cavalry. Thorfinn, however, goes back to Askeladd, as he cannot allow him to die at the hands of others. Askeladd, at this time all month long, one against all, he is wounded but continues to cut down warriors one after another. At the end of the war, they decide to shoot Askeladd with a bow, but the cunning Askeladd says that Thorfinn and Bjorn are the best warriors, and it's not so easy to get the prince if they kill Askeladd. But if they take him hostage, they can exchange the leader for the prince. The warriors decide to shoot Askeladd in the legs. Just then, Thorkel appears with his squad of warriors. Askeladd decides to drop his weapons and surrender. Thorgil tells Thorkel that they will soon bring him the prince. Thorkel approaches Askeladd and asks where Thorfinn is, and then tells them to kill everyone except Askeladd. Thorkel's warriors ask Askeladd's warriors to first take their weapons, and then they start fighting them. Thorfinn appears and charges at the giant, but Thorkel punches him, knocking him and his horse away. Thorfinn tells Thorkel to step away from Askeladd, as he is his prey. The giant smirks and says that a mouse is challenging a bear, but Thorfinn says that if the bear doesn't give Askeladd up, he will kill him. Thorkel replies that then he definitely won't give him up and starts fighting Thorfinn. The giant attacks Thorfinn, but the boy dodges and hits Thorkel with his blade, but under his clothes is chainmail. Then Thorfinn asks how Thorkel knows his father. The giant says that Thorfinn's mother, Helga, was of noble birth, and his father rose from the bottom with his skills. Thorkel always admitted that Thors was stronger than him. He asks Thorfinn to prove that he is truly the son of his strongest father. The giant also asks what it means to be a true warrior, but Thorfinn, without answering, ran up to the giant and cut him several times. In response, Thorkel kicked the boy, who flew several tens of meters and passed out. Meanwhile, the prince, unconscious from falling off the sleigh, dreams and talks with Ragnar. Coming to, he sees Canute. He is tearing through warriors with his bare hands. Then a separated Bjorn runs towards the prince. The monk suggests the prince run, but Canute stands up with a stern face and walks towards Bjorn, causing him to retreat. Then the prince grabs Bjorn's face, which brings Bjorn to his senses, but he immediately gets a knife wound in his side. Then the prince decides to go to Thorkel himself, take the sleigh for the wounded, and asks the monk to help the wounded. Canute says that this will be his path as a true king. Further, we are transported back to the battle where Thorfinn regained consciousness after falling. Thorkel, seeing that the boy couldn't fight, gave him a couple of minutes to recover. Meanwhile, Thorkel decided to tell Thorfinn about his father. A long, long time ago, Thorkel and Thors were commanders of the Vikings. Among the strongest warriors there, Thors was always head and shoulders above everyone else. The leader of the Vikings, Sigvaldi, even gave him one of his daughters as a wife, and this was Thorfinn's mother, Helga. Thorfinn says that this means the leader of the Vikings is his grandfather, and Sigvaldi is also Thorkel's older brother, so Thorkel is his uncle. Thorkel's last battle with Thors was in Hordaland, Norway. During the battle, Thors fell into the water and did not resurface. Thorkel was very saddened because he wanted to defeat Thors with his own hands one day, but it turned out Thors did not die. Thorkel saw him in his village after he was buried. When Thorkel was resting at Thors's house, two people with a child came out of the house. He thought they were merchants and jumped towards them. It turned out to be Thors and Helga. Thorkel was about to tell his older brother about this miracle, but Thors stopped him and said that they were leaving the city, and he was also leaving the Vikings, and asked Thorkel to pretend he hadn't seen anything. Thorkel reminded Thors of the rules that Viking traders are killed. Then Thorkel attacks, but Thors breaks his axe with his bare hands and knocks out the giant. After the story, Thorfinn decides to attack Thorkel again, but Askeladd stops him and tells him the plan of how to defeat the giant, as Askeladd promised to release all of them for Thorfinn's victory. After that, the fight continues, and Thorkel furiously attacks and throws Thorfinn. Thorfinn pretends to be super tired, and Askeladd grapples with Thorkel. Thorfinn knocks out the giant boy with a blow to the temple. The boy is immediately thrown aside, and Thorfinn prepares to kill him, but Thorkel stops them. Then Canute appears and asks everyone to stop this slaughter. The prince says that if he is truly a leader, he should set an example for his warriors. He asks to release Thorfinn and declare him the victor. The prince also says that he needs a sleigh with Thorfinn and Askeladd as escorts. However, the warriors block his path, but the prince says that his father, King Sweyn, dislikes him and intends to give the throne to his brother Harold. This means Canute's existence only grieves the king. Thorkel realizes that King Sweyn hopes he will kill the prince. Canute confirms this. Then Thorkel asks what will happen next if everyone is released. Canute says he will go to the main camp in Gainsborough to fight his father. Unexpectedly, Thorkel says he will help him fight the king and follow the prince. However, if Canute is too soft, he will kill him. Askeladd, at this moment, uses the ha-ha-ha-ha ninjutsu technique. Then he approaches the prince and gives him a sword, saying that he is the one who killed Ragnar. However, if the prince spares him, Askeladd is ready to take Ragnar's place. Canute says that is what they will do. Now Canute's goal is to overthrow King Sweyn. A month passes. We are shown Floki, who has met the prince with his detachment. Canute asks why they are meeting him with weapons in hand, to which Floki replies that he received an inaccurate report stating that an enemy was approaching. Then the prince asks to convey information about his arrival, that he will visit the king in the evening. After that, the prince tells his subordinates that they cannot attack yet, as they will be considered traitors, so they need to prepare. He asks Thorkel to go to the clan leaders and establish contact with them. Askeladd takes Canute to the king so that he can study him and devise a plan to overthrow Sweyn. They arrive at the king's presence. The king says he is glad to see Canute and asks them to come closer. Askeladd and Thorfinn at this moment notice about 20 warriors ready for battle. However, Canute asks them not to draw their knives, because whoever draws first will lose this war. Then all three go to the king. The king asks them to bow. Then he asks where Ragnar is. The prince replies that he died. Then the king asks his son to stand up and walk 10 steps forward. The king, seeing the prince's face, said that he had changed and now resembled him in his youth. In response, Canute said that the king should then understand what is in his heart. Sweyn says he would never have thought that his son Canute resembled him. Then he recounts that in his youth, he knew his father and took the crown for himself. He believed that in this way he was saving the country. However, after putting on the crown, he changed as it grants power similar to a god. Then Canute asks if the crown ordered his father to kill his son. In response, Sweyn summons warriors who surround Canute and the others. The king says he will send Canute to Gaul so that he can live there in peace. However, if Canute refuses, he will die immediately. Askeladd asks to be given the floor. The pirate says that His Highness Canute has won over Thorkel and the London army to his side. The prince sacrificed himself and conquered the impregnable city. Such a reward for such loyal service will cause indignation among many of his army's followers. Then the king stands up and says that Askeladd was right. He will reward Canute tomorrow. He is leaving for York, where there will be a feast. That is where Canute will receive his reward. Then everyone in the bar celebrates the prince's reward. Canute asks if Askeladd can kill the king. Askeladd replies that it will be difficult. It is better to do as the king asks for now and wait for the right moment. Then Gunnar, Ragnar's brother, arrives. The prince informs him that his brother is no longer alive. Then he asks him to spy on the king and report everything to the prince. Then all the nobility begins to gather in the city of York. Pisidius Shell is also there, who accidentally recognizes Askeladd on a passing ship with the prince. Suddenly, Askeladd says that his highness prince needs to die. An archer shoots at him from the crowd. The prince is shielded, and Thorfinn finds the assassin and kills him right in front of Leif. Guards appear and think Thorfinn is the killer, but Thorfinn, swearing by Allah, explains that it wasn't him. Also, one of the locals called Thorfinn Karl's Ice, saying he was the one who defeated Thorkel the Tall. Leif recognizes Thorfinn, and the boy recognizes him in return. Thorfinn then recounts everything that happened over the years and his intention to kill Askeladd. He also asks what's happening in Vinland, but Leif is surprised Thorfinn didn't ask about his family. However, Thorfinn gets angry and leaves. Meanwhile, the prince's body is pulled ashore, and it turns out he was replaced by a double. The prince is safe and sound, and Askeladd says he didn't make the substitution in York for nothing. There are definitely those who want to kill the prince. Next, we see Askeladd, who has come to visit Bjorn. Bjorn asks about Askeladd's leg and then says he will join him tomorrow. After that, we see the king discussing Floki's failed assassination attempt, news of which spread like wildfire. Askeladd then tells his close associates that he orchestrated the assassination himself to make the rumors a reality. This was all done to strengthen Sienna's influence. Now the king won't be able to separate Canute and Thorkel. Askeladd then suggests that Gunnar is the king's spy and they need to be more careful with him. This turned out to be true. Thorfinn's surveillance confirmed it. Next, Thorfinn again challenges Askeladd to a duel. This time, the prince will be a witness, but first, Askeladd will fight Bjorn to help him go to Valhalla. Askeladd pierces Bjorn and calls him his only friend. Then, a fight begins between Askeladd and Thorfinn. Askeladd throws his sword, catches Thorfinn, and then beats him with his bare hands. The prince then revives the boy and declares Askeladd the victor. Askeladd takes Bjorn's body and leaves. The prince asks why Askeladd chose him, and Askeladd replies that he wants to see that Canute is the most suitable for the role of king. At this time, the beaten Thorfinn remembers everything that happened to him in his life, and then he loses consciousness. After that, he regains consciousness and runs after a man, thinking it's Askeladd. However, it turns out to be ordinary proud men who decided to teach him a lesson, but Thorfinn dispatches all three. Then, guards appear and put him in prison. Meanwhile, the elders and clan leaders are discussing the rumors. The king appears with Prince Canute. Everyone bows before them. The king then gives a speech where he says he is very happy that his son Canute and his old friend Thorkel have returned safe and sound. Then he grants Canute authority over Mercia and asks Thorkel to support his son. Next, Sweyn wants to continue his conquests in Ireland, and Askeladd is very happy. Everything went as he planned. However, unexpectedly, the king says there are fools who have no respect for their king. The king is talking about whales. He wants to destroy them and attack them next spring. Askeladd is shocked that the king is going to Wales. Floki noticed his concern and reported it to the king, and Sweyn was very interested in what worried Askeladd so much. Askeladd then thinks about how to solve this problem. Thorkel, sitting nearby, asks how he managed to hide so easily from him in Wales. Askeladd said that it is his home and his mother's grave, and also his country. Thorkel then expresses his condolences to Askeladd, as Wales will soon be gone. Meanwhile, Leif came to Thorfinn in prison. He learned about his detention from one of the merchants. He said that 11 years ago, when Thorfinn disappeared, Leif promised that he would bring the boy back to his home. It was a promise he made to the late Thors and to himself. As a result, Thorfinn decides to go home. Leif suggests that after they get home, they then go to the lands of Bellado. Leif and Thorfinn begin to pack their tent for departure. However, Thorfinn suddenly disappears. Next, at the meeting, Askeladd the king summons him to bestow an award, giving him 50 pounds of silver for saving the prince. The king also expresses personal gratitude for saving his son. The king also said that he has big plans for Askeladd. He will help him in the attack on Wales. After this, Askeladd asks the king to reconsider the plans for Wales, as the lands there are barren and it would be a waste of time. And also, because of the 10-year war against the English, his army needs to regain strength. Floki, however, says that they cannot simply ignore the disrespect of the Welsh towards King Sweyn. Then Skiled suggests making him an envoy to try to negotiate with them. However, the king approaches Skiled and says that this is exactly what true subordinates should be like. The king asks Askeladd to continue helping him, and Sweyn also whispered that Askeladd should choose between Wales or Canute. If Askeladd brings him Canute's head, then he will not touch Wales. Sweyn also said that he knows his mother was a slave and that Wales possesses the only valuable resource, slaves. During these words, Askeladd shoves the king's hand away and says that he is disgusted to serve a king like Sweyn. The king was taken aback by these words, and Skiled repeated what he said. Then he tells everyone to stand back, or he will kill the king. Sweyn asks him to put away his sword, and then he will forgive his insult. However, Skiled says that his true name is Lucius Artorius Castus. He is the rightful king who should rule the lands of Britain. Suddenly, Floki throws a cup at Skiled and incites the soldiers against him, but Skiled, with one swing, cuts off the king's head. At this time, Thorfinn reaches the king's building and through the window sees Askeladd fighting with the soldiers. Canute calls everyone to attack Askeladd and kill him. Canute understood that Askeladd did all this to save both Wales and the prince. Floki begins to fight Skiled, but Top appears and Askeladd is distracted, and at that moment, Floki's sword hits his side. Askeladd says that Canute understood everything correctly. After this, everyone begins to rejoice. However, Thorfinn is not happy that Askeladd died by his hand. Askeladd asks Thorfinn to kill him and fulfill his duty. Thorfinn is filled with anger, and the dying Skiled asks how Thorfinn will live now and asks Thor's son to become a true warrior. Then Thorfinn looks at Canute, accelerates, and attacks him. Thorkel protects him, but Thorfinn manages to scratch the prince's face. After this, Canute asks not to kill Thorfinn. He takes the crown and puts it on, declaring himself the new king and asking everyone to disperse. At this time, Thorfinn drops his blade, and in it is reflected the entire history of Thor's son.